Hey everybody, welcome to Raising Vibrations. And in this video, I want to explore with you some more reflections on the Mars-Uranus opposition. And I want to continue the story and kind of just digest for us a little bit more about what this transit has been really doing for us, and maybe encourage a more deeper reflection and thinking as this transit has now moved past the exact intense opposition, right? Uranus is sitting now at 19 degrees of Taurus, and Mars is sitting at 22 degrees of Mars. So 20 degrees of Scorpio. Okay, so this opposition is now come into full maturation, and you should now start to begin recognizing little insights drop into your perspective, drop into your field of vision, drop into your collective process of understanding. And it's important to note that there may not actually be any continuity in or association with insights, right? They're kind of feeling a little bit fractured, and there might be an insider revelation around this process and something here, but it never feels as if it's all kind of put together in a way of like, this feels clear to me. And so if you are experiencing that series of revelations or insights into things, but as I said, there's no continuity, there's no connection to things, that is okay. I encourage you to not try to make any forced connections either way as well. My first reflection or insight in this video is to allow these processes of insights that appear to be random or different and just be present with you. Okay, just take note. Just like, yep, okay. If you are somebody that's very sensitive to Uranian experiences, like let's say you've got Uranus transiting your 12th house, or Uranus is transiting your Neptune, or Uranus is, nobody will have Neptune in Taurus. So wherever Uranus is transiting, maybe a Piscean planet, I encourage you to take a pen and paper and just kind of write down what reflections you're getting, or take a voice recorder and just sort of capture these moments of sort of reflections and insights that it's like downloads, right? They're just kind of coming into your field, and you're noticing them occurring. So you might forget about this, right? You might feel that you may not necessarily have the clarity at a different point. Your ego might come more into what is salient and present right now, and not be in that more Uranian state of insight and reflection. So that's my first piece of suggestion here, is just to capture them, but at the same time try to not force any of these insights to have any connection yet. As I said, Uranian experiences are a lot about long-term memory, and so a lot of the things that you may be experiencing or coming into insights about have got to do with events that have happened, quote unquote, in different timelines, right? Different moments in your life. And you may be sort of revisiting different like older experiences. And as they flood into your experience, you may see it differently, right? That's what Uranus does for us. It allows for us to observe experiences from a different point in time, and in that observation of seeing things from the top, from the bottom, from the left, from the right, however you may see it, it offers a sort of breaking apart of the way that you may have crystallized your sense of the experience at the time that it was happening. Yeah. So that's what I mean when I say that the fragmentation is more of an opening up to a quantum reality versus one that feels very linear in time. Okay. All right. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I want to talk a little bit about the archetypes of Captain Hook and Peter Pan. All right. Captain Hook and Peter Pan, to me, represent beautiful ways that Aquarian experiences can express themselves in our consciousness and our psyche. So trauma is associated with Uranus and Aquarius, and specifically experiences of disassociation where an event has happened too rapidly for us, and the capacity to integrate or process the event has become stunted or crystallized, right? We become frozen in the process. Or it can be developmental trauma, which is an ongoing kind of consistent pressure of a situation that has now led to you having this habit of responding in a freeze if, say, an event happens, right? That more has to do with the moon in our astrology chart. But in terms of Uranus itself, it will point out where things have accelerated beyond the current configuration of your emotional landscaping. Okay, so another way of saying that is that events may take place in our lives where there is a kind of flooding in of too much to process in the moment, and so we become kind of fractured, right? It fractures our capacity to make sense of something, and we become sort of like we're stuck here, right? That's why you'll notice that when you study any form of trauma research, there's always this often response of being stuck as a deer in the headlights, right? We're just like frozen in that moment there because it's too much to handle, whatever that event is, and so we become crystallized in that moment. And oftentimes, when the event is deeply intense for us, and the configuration of the experience may be overwhelming, we freeze into a complex of Peter Pan, or we freeze into a complex of Captain Hook. And there is a relevancy in terms of what this video is about in terms of reflections, okay? Because it has to do with what I was talking about in the Scorpio archetype, or the Scorpio new moon, where we are progressively working through layers of emotions that have become displaced in us because of violations, right? Violations of our trust, violations of through betrayal, loss, and abandonment, right? This is an extreme kind of sensitivity to where we have shut down and caused defensive processes in a response to a very intense experience when we're growing up in our lives, right? And these intense experiences do not have to be like intense like that. It can just, as I said, be a consistent rejection of your creativity that has led you to not know that your creativity is actually a superpower within yourself, and you shut it down all the time. So it can play out like that. So that's where you need to come in this video and kind of pause and reflect on where there are patterns within you that you sort of stop yourself, or you hold back on yourself, or you know that you regress into. And so do you regress into the Peter Pan complex, or do you regress into the more Captain Hook complex, which I'll break down for us? But these complexes emerge because of loss of power, right? These complexes emerge because of a betrayal or abandonment. So we tend to kind of become more hypervigilant to these situations within our lives. This hypervigilance is more of a way of protecting yourself from not experiencing the original sensation overload that we often go through when traumatic experiences or Uranian experiences happen. Now, one thing to say, Uranus or Uranian experiences accelerate us further beyond where we currently are. And that arc of where am I at, and then where have I gone to, and I'm not ready for that moment, is where the freeze response takes place. So it's the arc of here I am, here's where this event has taken me so rapidly that I didn't have time to actually integrate or process what happened. And that arc is where we get stuck. So this arc now with Uranus and Taurus in opposition to Mars, what the turbulence was about, what the emotions were about, is what has become stuck in the arc, right? Where have we become frozen in the decentralization process? And right now, as this opposition is kind of ticked over, we now have the possibility or the opportunity to start to breathe a bit as things have become less intense. And now we can start to process what these emotions are about and how they've played out, and what has been revealed to us in our field when this disturbance took place, right? So the disturbance has taken place, and what this video is pointing to is where are we in the story of how we responded, or what has happened when this disturbance has erupted into our lives, right? That's the point of this. So again, coming back to states of regression, right? We can regress into the Peter Pan complex. And this is the part of us that you'll notice where the regression comes in because oftentimes the experience is so intense for us that we form an identity that shields us from the world, and that identity stays as it's like innocent and childlike, right? And so we lose the key trauma here is the loss of agency. It's the inability to realize that you can come back from this experience. And so this world is too much for me to bear. And I need somebody else to be the adult around me. I need somebody else to take care of me or take care of the situation, or everybody else needs to change in order for this to feel better. Now is not the time for me to have this conversation, but at some point later on in the journey, it might be in a year's time from now, this is what we're suffering from in the world right now. Okay, there's these two dilemmas are present. They have been revealed because Uranus transits are taking place. Pluto and Aquarius will make it more visible for us, but we are living in a world right now with the kind of landscape is being deeply configured based on these two emotionally regressed responses within the collective, within people, right? And a lot of people um, have been actively working on healing these parts of ourselves. And this is again what this channel is all about, right? The ability to heal through these impacts and experiences and regressions, and remember the psyche, as opposed to kind of reacting out of this dismembered, split off parts of ourselves because at an earlier part of our lives, right, we didn't know that we were being gaslit. We didn't know that there was an abandonment and an emotional impoverishment because the absent parent was not there, right? Or whatever the story is, whatever the narrative is for you, right? We're at a time right now where we can kind of remember these things and bring them back together and work through them. But we also live in a world where it's apparent that these mechanisms are at play at large as well, and they are reconfiguring the entire structure of societies as well. So the Peter Pan dynamic, if you know what Peter Pan is or understand him, especially the movie Hook. If you've watched the Steven Spielberg version of Hook, I would say that's probably one of the best films to watch when it comes to understanding Aquarius signatures. Because in the film Hook, right, unlike all other Peter Pan films, Peter Pan is not young at the beginning. He's actually aged, right? He's aged, which is deeply interesting because Peter Pan is not aging in the process, right? He's emotionally stunted and regressed into this child that doesn't want to grow up, because the world, when you grow up, you can stop flying. But you know, as a child, right, when you can believe in possibility. That's what it means for Peter Pan to fly, is the belief in possibility. But as we age, we trade that fantasy for the real world, which is gravity, right? But along the road of trading that, we turn into Captain Hook. And Captain Hook is another way to split off, where we lose our inner child, right? We lose our authenticity. And this is really what this video is also about. And in terms of this emergence, is where has these patterns of wounding or trauma affected our capacity for authentic expression? Where have we shut down or masked ourselves in order to interact with the world, and not allow for that authentic reaction to exist because of maybe the sensitivity to rejection, maybe the sensitivity to abandonment, maybe the sensitivity to recreating emotional impoverishment because of the lack of parental support growing up, as an example, right? Whatever that narrative is. So you're starting to get the picture of what I'm talking about here. Again, this Mars-Uranus opposition really sort of opened up these lines of stuck and stifled energy within us to be freed, right? And so moving the body is one of the ways that this energy starts to move through us again. So kind of coming back to the Peter Pan film and Hook, if you look at that film, it's such a powerful movie, and of course it happened when Uranus and Neptune was in Capricorn and they were forming that conjunction. So Steven Spielberg's play on Peter Pan sort of aging and then having to find his inner child again speaks volumes to the statement I made, which is we're living in a world right now where Peter Pan complexes are running because of unhealed inner child dynamics. And we're also living in a world where the Captain Hook story is out large and played because there's an unacknowledgement of the intensity of grief that hasn't been processed and the emotional trauma that hasn't been processed, that has been repressed. And so when we split off into Hook experiences, Captain Hook experiences, through an accelerated decentralization of Uranus, instead of going into the world is too intense for me and I want to remain childlike, we respond to it as nothing actually happened. Like, I'm fine. Like, yeah, so this happened, but what are you going to do, kind of thing, right? And so we deny the complexity of this experience, and we close down to the point where we reject everything that is life affirming, and what happens is that this part of your personality will become rigid and stop its acceptance of anything beautiful in the world ever again. And so in the story of Captain Hook, right, he loses his hand, right? It gets bitten off by the crocodile. And that is a traumatic experience. Like, one minute he's doing his things, and the next minute he's lost his hand, and his entire world has been reconfigured based on this experience. And that's happened. And I'm sure many of you have gone through experiences within your life where not the hand, but something has happened in such an intense and rapid way that has reconfigured the entire landscape of your psychological and emotional perspective and cognition of the world. And it's impacted you. You no longer can go back to that land again. So Peter Pan, in his response to regression, says, I will remain in this place because going into that world where, I've lost my hand is too much for me. So that danger, that crocodile, like, I'm not going to go near that place, and I'm going to stay in this infantilized world and know that it's possible that my hand can be back. But in reality, it's not, right? So there's a deep kind of denial process. And then with the Captain Hook experiences is that the unresolved grief of loss is not talked about and processed, and eventually at some point, due that regression, it starts to emerge out in the world as a complete annihilation of anything that represents innocence. And we are living in that world right now. We are living in the binary where there are patterns of unresolved grief and unresolved acceptance of things moving on. And that repression has completely squashed out any potential for innocence. And so that's, again, as I said, where psychopathy, these types of things can take place, a complete absence of any form of recognition of innocence and destruction. Because at the end of the day, if I've lost this and I haven't processed that and I haven't actually felt the fact that how it's impacted me, then if somebody else gets bitten by it, I'm just going to be like, that's life, because that's how I coped with it, right? So there's no like, oh shit, this was an intense experience. So we can kind of like emerge into these two patternings. And that's, again, what Uranus-Mars opposition maybe have brought up for us, is that you might have noticed that as the emergence kind of saturated into your collective field, it's brought up where you may have got a part of you that has said, no, I don't want to go back out to that experience again because there's crocodiles there. And those crocodiles can bite off my hand. And so I'm going to stay right here and kind of live in a world of idealization and try to, I'm not going to address my shadow, right? Peter Pan very distinctly does not want his shadow to be a part of him, right? Because it means that he's part of this world. There's another side of him that he's not acknowledging. So Wendy, right? Wendy in this film, or in this kind of thing, represents the maturation process. She asks Peter Pan to grow up as a way to accept his mortality. And that's, again, what happens with us here with Uranus experiences, Uranus opposed Mars experiences, especially around cycles of violation, cycles of loss of meaning and purpose, is that if the emotion of betrayal and abandonment and crossing the boundaries is so intense at an earlier part of our lives, that emotion comes into us and reconfigures us. And we may avoid that and say, it's too dangerous for me, I'm going to pretend it doesn't exist, right? Or we may do the Captain Hook thing, and we're just like, yeah, tough shit. Like, I feel emotions. Why should I have any care for you? Like, who gives a shit what you feel like or how this has hurt you? Right? Just for a moment, look what is happening in the world right now. And take a look at how those narratives are playing out and those binaries and the polarities are showing up. And look how easily we could get possessed by those two complexities, right? There's a war going on between Captain Hook and Peter Pan in terms of archetypal landscapes. And if you sense and see that process, in the way that I'm describing it, you can see how these are merging into our collective. And how has that played out for you? Like, how has this, and so just to kind of come back to something that's more tangible and real for yourself, is Mars-Uranus opposition brought about memories of where the landscape at an earlier part of your life was reconfigured by an intense experience. And how is that shaping your worldview? How are you struggling with the rupture? And when that rupture takes place, how are you working through the repair process? Because when we're stuck in Peter Pan stories and Hook stories, is that we're still wrestling with struggling to emerge back into the world, right? And it's primarily because it's too intense. It's like emerging back into the world is like, that's a place that can hurt me again, and I don't want to do it. So we remain loss of agency, right? We're stuck in that, frozen in that place. Whereas when Uranus transits come along, again, Mars activates this deep memory field, it erupts into the consciousness like that. And so now, as I said right at the beginning of the video, let the experiences of insights and perspective shifts kind of settle, and you may be actually seeing the situation through different eyes, right? You may be looking at it in a new light, right? As the thumbnail suggests. And again, it's not possible to fully comprehend things, but it is be open to how the Uranian opposed Mars transit has brought things to the surface. And instead of sort of seeing the emotional eruption as shit, this was bad and I hate it and I wish it didn't happen, to more in the sense that what came up as old wounds that are still possessing you in the way. And as I said, now it's time to kind of reflect on, am I leaning towards the Peter Pan process where I don't want to come back into the world because I want everybody else to deal with it. So you deal with that. You deal with that thing. I'm going to remain here and pretend that these emotions don't mean anything. I'm not going to do the work to kind of heal that inner child part of me. Or where do you just kind of go, yeah, it sucked, suck it up. The world's just, bad place and there are crocodiles everywhere and you might get your hand bitten off and, that's it. What you want to do here is kind of merge the two together, right? Captain Hook and Peter Pan will always come together to meet each other in conflict to try to resolve the issue, which is that Peter Pan seeks to grow up and take responsibility for his life, even and knowing that life is going to be challenging, and grow from the experience. And let Peter and Captain Hook come into a state of conversation and deep acknowledgement of the grief and be like, like, the fact that the crocodile and this experience has happened to me has deeply hurt me in many, many, many ways. That's the way to resolve these two things, is that they're seeking each other, right? Captain Hook is seeking to revitalize his inner Peter Pan, and Peter Pan is seeking to come back into the maturation process of, growing up. And we're seeking that at this point in time. So this is where I'll end off the video, where has the experiences of the past shaped you to create masks that you may use to protect yourself from life? And how do those masks show up as acceptance and cynicalness? And how has those masks showed up as a complete need to just like go, no, I can't deal with this process. Somebody else is going to do it for me. Where have you lost the agency to act on something that's healing for you? And where you need to come into more deeper vulnerability and acknowledgement of the experience as something that actually took something away from you, and that needs to be processed, right? So that's my reflections for this video. I really hope that you found a lot of value in it. Let me know in the comments section how this has landed for you, and tell me, where is your Peter Pan and Captain Hook story playing out, right? Where are these two characters revealing themselves within your consciousness? I'd love to hear it, as always. And again, thank you so much for this time with you, and I'll see you in another video. Bye.